I will say that sometimes in my life, I have chased this concept of being on the other side. And I was like, I just need to get past this or to get through this. Being on the other side doesn't mean I just have to tough it out. Though it is tough, you will approach them differently. You will approach them more holistically. You will feel more connected and more authentic. So that getting to the other side is not that the work is over, but the work does get easier.
Welcome to another episode of The Rooted Founder. I'm excited about today because we're going to be talking about grief and the ways that we create relationship dynamics with our businesses. And I'm talking with Rosie Noel. She's a certified coach, works with high performers like Vina, who was on the show already, some high achievers in the real estate space as well. And she has a unique perspective on managing transitions and what we go through as entrepreneurs. So, Rosie, I'm excited to have you here. And to start it off, I thought you could just share what's been on your heart and what you have seen emerge with your work with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited to be here. And I loved connecting with you, just meeting you before coming on the podcast, really hearing about your story made me feel it was very validating as a coach, because in coaching, like I call a lot of what I do executive coaching or leadership coaching, but so much of it is just coaching them on being a human, right? And learning how to do these different skills like grief, when even though they think it's about business, right? There's so much more that is people are required to go deeper on. And so I love just connecting with you about, we have similar perspectives on that coaching approach.
Yeah.
So as far as what's just been on my heart lately, I've been taking some time. I've had my own, I was doing executive coaching. I was a vice president at a large Fortune 1000 company prior to starting my business. And so I started my business a little over a year ago. And it's, as the year's kind of closing out, I've been taking some intentional time to really reflect on not only what has worked and not worked over the last year, what types of clients have been I have seen the best success and that I've been the most energized working with. And then I also reflected back just on my coaching experience in general. And what I identified is that I love working with people when they are in what I call a transitional phase. So if you think about like the spectrum of a transition, they're either early on in their transitional phase where they're like, something's not working. And either they deep down, maybe they know what it is, maybe they don't, but they know something's not working and they have to let go. And there's a grieving process that happens to let go of the thing that isn't serving them. And after you let go, sometimes people are in that, like, I've let go, but I don't know what I'm stepping into, or I'm afraid to step into the thing that is going to serve me. Or working with people that have just stepped into it, but it's still new and terrifying. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome that happens. So that whole spectrum of the transition is probably my favorite part to coach people during, because it is like, being a coach, it allows me to help them not only step into things that are purposeful, but also step in from a place of authenticity and power and groundedness when you're in a period where you don't feel grounded at all. So that's really been on my mind lately. And it seems to just be coming up in a lot of places as well.
Yeah. We both coach entrepreneurs, but in very different ways. So you help them with their mindset and the internal ceiling that they're hitting. And I do that too, but most of my work is operational. So it's tactical. And oftentimes the entrepreneurs I work with, they know what they need to do. It's not like their how-to material isn't out there. You could ask Google, you could ask ChatGPT, you can talk to any of the mentors and masterminds that people are involved in. It's not that they don't know what needs to be done or even how to do it. It's how do I get my human to do the thing that I know I need to do? Like, who's controlling my human? So you're so right. Like our initial conversation around how do I be a good human? How do I operate my human so that I can execute on the things that I'm being called to execute on? And in my personal experience and the people that I've worked with, that grief component is often not acknowledged. We don't oftentimes entrepreneurs are labeled as control freaks, or they won't delegate, or they have shiny penny syndrome, or they micromanage, and all of these labels get put on it. And what I have found in my personal experience is I've had to grieve. I've had to grieve the loss of what I thought it was or the type of leader I was up until a certain point. And I had to let that go so I could create space to call in something new. So I'm curious for you, in working with people on the psychological journey, what hurdles have you seen them have to overcome and integrate to get to that letting go?
Yeah.
Right?
Gosh, it's so funny as you were talking, I was like lighting up because it just what you said really resonated. And it's funny because I've been through so many transitions of my own in life, which I think is who isn't, right? Everybody goes through transitions in life, but I have found those moments so pivotal for me. I think that that's part of why I get really energized by helping people through them. And what you were saying around, yes, going through like that grieving process, part of it is what I've learned both in my own experience, and I'm experiencing it right now as I'm reflecting at this phase in my life and my business. But when I'm working with entrepreneurs, is a lot of times they will start out and set goals based on what they think they're supposed to be, and oftentimes what other people have told them it's supposed to look like, right? They're getting that from external messages. And the more we listen to it's really easy to listen to a guru or go to a mastermind, and sometimes we become a sponge and not a filter. And we're like, okay, this person says I should do this thing, I'm going to do it. And then it's not until you're like, wait a minute, I'm doing these things, they're either not serving me, I'm not feeling energized, or I'm not seeing the results I want to see. And letting go of what you think it was supposed to look like or how somebody else told you it was supposed to look, there's a grieving process that comes with that. You have to do it so you can step into, okay, well, what's it supposed to look like for me? What do I feel the most energized by? Or what have I gotten the best results from? And so it's been happening for me a lot lately, is really coaching people. It's to step into like the authenticity of like, let's set the goals based on your values and the things that are important to you, not because somebody told you this should be your goal. So that's just been coming up more and more for me lately, again, in my personal life and also with my clients.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. And what you just described, I summarize in, I woke up in my dream life, but it didn't feel how I thought it was going to feel.
Mm.
And in what you're saying is society and culture have influenced so much of what we think we want or we think we need. And then we climb corporate ladder, revenue ladder, follower ladder, whatever that ladder is. And we're like, okay, we got it. And then it's like, wait, I'm not fulfilled. There's bigger, better, more. What else is out there? And then we're on this hamster wheel. And, there's so much talk about getting out of the rat race, as in having your passive income exceed your active income. Like there's all of that, or expense, but there's all of that. But it's also the inner freedom. So how do you work with your clients on separating those two? Like time, location, financial freedom, which is eyes open, if you will, like the external freedom, and then the internal freedom of feeling the joy and the connection and the love and the peace. Yeah. Also, like the integration of the two.
Yeah. It's so funny as you say, I was like, I don't separate them. I distinguish them, but I don't separate them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and the way, have you heard of the concept of Ikigai?
No, explain.
I'm so excited to tell you about it then. So it's a Japanese concept that stands for a reason for being. And it's the intersection of four things. It's what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can get paid for. And I remember learning about this concept when I first, like 8 years ago, started going through my first coaching training program. And it blew my mind, especially because I was in the corporate world at this time. And I had what I was good at, what I could get paid for, and what the world needed. But I was missing what I loved. And the way that it was described in this little diagram, if you Google Ikigai, you'll see it. And it says, comfortable, but a feeling of emptiness. And I was like, yes, this is how I feel every day in my corporate job. And this was before I was a coach. I was a consultant transitioning to coaching. Anyway, so what I mean when I say I distinguish them is that you have to have all of them to have that real sense of fulfillment. And so like if you're just doing something you can get paid for, but you don't love it, and you're not good at it, but like you somehow have found a way to get paid for it, you're not going to feel very fulfilled. And so I try, but what I do, the work that I do is a lot of helping people identify what they're good at, and then using that to draw connections to, okay, you're good at it. Let's connect it to the things that you love. Now that we have this foundation of what you're good at and what you love, let's point it to things that we make sure contribute, right, to the world. It's something that people need. And let's also make sure you can get paid for it, because you need to get paid to survive. And so, but I like to start almost to use the what you're good at and what you love as the compass to point you, rather than the other way around of like, well, how can I make money? And I work with a lot of people. As of late, I work with a lot of people in real estate investing. And one of the first questions I ask them is like, why real estate? Why? You could have done any other thing in the world. Like, why did you choose real estate? And when we dig and dig and dig, right, a lot of times it's because it's a way that they can make money, which is great. But it's like, let's then make sure that you do real estate in a way that allows you to do what you're good at when you're doing it, and do the elements of it that you actually love. Because if you don't have those things, you're not going to see the same success that other people have. Instead of following somebody else's blueprint, let's build your own. And so that's what I mean when I say they intersect. They're distinct, but they intersect.
Yes. I love this. So I've actually gone through a reason for being process. And I didn't know the Japanese or that term for it. And one of mine is creating space and grace. Like spaces where we can unmask, tell the full truth, embrace the brutal facts, as Jim Collins calls it in Good to Great, and create awareness around it without there being shame or blame. And then being able to create the space to call in something new, as in letting go of the way things were to call in the new. And I love what you said about following somebody else's blueprint. And that's such a courageous act, is to let go of what your family said, what society said, what culture said. And we hear it all the time. I mean, especially for you and I, we probably grew up hearing this because of the way social media has been. We grew up hearing this, but then there's the experiential aspect of it where you've actually gone through it personally. And it's like, oh, all these things I've heard are finally clicking and I get it. And when you opened, you talked about the enough is enough. I've hit a ceiling. What I'm going through right now is not working for me. I need to let go of that and create space. And that includes grieving, transitioning, all of that. And then once you know what you're loved to do and you're great at, then you have to step into the next phase, which when you opened, you said activates imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So how do we navigate that? Because these are the ceilings of progression for growth.
Yeah. It's not easy. And one of the, I can't remember if I told you about this before, but one of the tools I use in my coaching is called Clifton Strengths. And it's an assessment. It's created by Gallup. And it's an assessment that helps you identify what your strengths are. And it's really cool, and it's extremely empowering, because when you are feeling like an imposter, it reminds you, like, I still have these strengths, even if I'm starting out in something new or I'm leveling up in something way. Part of leveling up requires you to be new. It's very grounding to say, okay, but I haven't lost these tools. I haven't, the strengths that I have are still me. I just have to learn how to use them in this new setting. And so that's one of the core, it's really helpful for people to have like a piece of paper that they can look at that says, these are the things you're really good at. And it can help quell some of that imposter syndrome, because not only does it give them sort of like, we'll call it an objective piece of data for them to look at, but it reminds them of who they are. And when they can, that's the, like, when you remember who you are, then you don't feel like an imposter anymore, because you're not trying to be anybody other than you. And maybe you're new at something, but that doesn't make you an imposter. So I don't know if that made any sense, but that is one of helping people really, it's like return to themselves. The assessment is just one of the ways I do that.
Yeah, I think also what you're speaking to is identity. Because remembering who you are is having clarification on your gift in this lifetime. And when you're taking your gift in this lifetime to the setting of business, you get to offer that gift there. When you take your gift in this lifetime to your dinner table, you get to offer your gift there. When you take it to your social networks or your community, you get to offer your gift there. And in my own experience, what I've noticed is that there was a season when I was codependent with my business. When my business was doing good, I was doing good. When my business wasn't doing good, I wasn't doing good. And the team's happy, I'm happy. The team's not happy, I'm not happy. And it was rattling to my core when things didn't go as planned, or I couldn't control the outcome, or was beyond my capacity at that time. And the courage to step into that, the courage to be a beginner, like you said, level 10 is the new one, you're just leveling up. And getting clear on your true identities. How do you, so the Clifton helps because it gives you a North Star, if you will, to remind you of, I'm hardwired with these innate abilities and these strengths. And then I get to test them in my business or around my dinner table or in my community or around my relationships. How do you help people navigate when things go well, checking their ego, when things don't go well, checking, their saboteurs, if you will?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that word, saboteur. So a lot of it goes back to grounding. And what I mean in that is it's so much of it is like in the foundation that you set up that you can constantly refer back to. So yes, strengths is one of them. And I call if your why is your purpose, your strengths are your who, the identity part. And then I talk about values being your what. And that is one of the other ways to ground clients when I'm working with them, either when they're riding high or they're, going deep. And it's like, what matters to you? What's important? What are the things like, so if they are on a high in their business and like, we're all humans with egos, right? That like keeping in check, like, okay, what values are present for you right now in this moment? And same thing, if they're low, also like, okay, well, do you have values that you're not honoring right now? So it's bringing them back to, because values is really like what matters to me. And reminding them of what matters to them, whether they're high or low, can be a grounding experience. And values can like definitely evolve over time, but usually once you have them, they serve a purpose for a solid period of time. So values, I would say, is one of the other things we do to like take you from here to here or here to here. And it just allows for like a more steady trajectory. But I do have to say, I just love the commentary you made around identity, because I think that's so important. And I think so much of at least American society, it can really only speak to is like your identity is tied to your career in so many ways, or it's tied to I'm a mom, right? Like there's just so many ways. I'm a daughter. I'm a Christian if you're religious, right? There's so many different ways that we can self-identify. And the values is like, it's also a different form of identity that is not tied to anything outside of you. It's only tied to things within you. So that's one of the reasons I love doing values-based work in coaching as well.
So can you re-say what you said about the why, the who, and the values, and maybe an example of your own, like this is my why and what guides me?
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I'm like, every time my why statement always evolves. And by the way, like you have personal whys and you have personal values, but those, I just did a call actually for Vina's community on like, if you have a business, you should have values for that business as well. And they are not going to be a one-to-one between your personal values and your business values. They should be different. They might not be 100% different, but they should be distinct. And I make like a pyramid out of it. And I say, right, the why, I'll call it the why, the what, the who, the how. So why is your purpose? What are your values? Who are your strengths? And the how are your goals? And you really shouldn't be set. And the reason the how is at the bottom is like, you shouldn't be setting goals until you're clear on who you are and what matters to you, right? Your values and your purpose and your strengths. So that's just the framework that I use. And to give an example, So my why has always been some flavor of, I always like tease it. It's really two things, and I haven't found a good way to get them together. But my why is always that I want to help people show up as the best versions of themselves. That's just always been what it was, even before I was a coach. And people, that includes me. Like, I think any sort of why should not just be about how I serve others. It should be holistic. Like, I want to show up as the best version of myself, and I want to help others show up as the best version of themselves. And so then my values, I have really three core values, which are trust, connection, and growth. And there's so many things that connect to that, but those are the three things that really, like, they've really been unchanging. And maybe I've had a fourth and a fifth that have come in and out over the years, but those are my three core values. And so let's say those are my values. My strengths, to use Clifton Strengths terms, I won't use the terms, I'll kind of just describe them. So my strengths are that I like to take in knowledge, information, even relationships and things I've learned from people. I like to take all of that information, I like to process it, and then I like to use it to help other people. I like to use it to help set goals for people, or help them essentially achieve their potential. One of the strengths I have is I see potential in others, and I want to help them achieve that. So I use all of the things that I collect to help see why people are unique and special, and help them grow into the potential that they have. And so now I take all of those things of, like, why, the what, and the who, and it's like, okay, now what are my goals, right? And so that might be, what are my personal goals in my personal life, or what are my goals for my business? And so after kind of like just looking at those values alone, combined with me now taking inventory, I call it, looking back on the last year, I'm like, okay, I love working with people in these like transitional periods. And so how can I set a goal for my business? I'm just sticking with business, that aligns with my values and the things that I've looked back on the last year that have worked really well for me. And so just setting a goal of, like, one of my goals for next year is to establish a women's coaching group, and that I've shared, right? Do a women's group coaching group for women that are specifically in this transitional phase of their personal life or of their professional life, and help them work through that phase to move through, if they're experiencing imposter syndrome, move through it more quickly. But that's one of the goals that have come back from my taking inventory, plus making sure it's aligned with my why, my what, and my who.
I love this. And a word that you've said multiple times is align, or alignment. Mm-hmm. And that has shown up a lot in my work as well. Mm-hmm. And I work with people and say, until we get to alignment, there's no sense taking action, because we're just playing whack-a-mole, and we're exhausting energy, we're diluting resources, we're zigzagging execution. Like, we have to get to a place of alignment. And one of the struggles that I have seen is that there is a resistance to getting to alignment, because high achievers tend to be a lot more action oriented, and we live more in the human doing versus the human being. And it's a struggle to slow down, to spend 4 to 6 hours in an integration session to get to a place of alignment before taking action. I'm curious if, one, has this emerged for you? And two, how do you help people almost slow down to go faster?
Yeah. Oh my, everything you said, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. And I always joke about that myself, because I'm like, I have to go slow to go fast personally. So working with clients, if they're that really intense entrepreneur, like Vina is a perfect example, since she's, a mutual connection. She's like, go, 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 go fast. Why are we still talking about this? We should have started this yesterday, and right. Like, now that type of person, I should never try to slow them down to be at my pace. My preferred pace is much slower. But no matter what somebody's natural pace is, how do you make sure to slow them down enough to make sure that they're being intentional? So to kind of tie back to your question, I just have to laugh, because I just coached with somebody. We coached last week and this week, and it was specifically building out a being list. We were talking about a topic. I was like, okay, who do you need to be? He basically wanted to be more relationship forward. I was like, well, who do you need to be somebody that's more relationship forward, to lean more into your relationships? And he made that list, and I didn't even tell him we were going to do the do portion of it. And then in our next session, right, we went through the be list, we added some more things, and I'm like, okay, what things now do you need to do to be more relationship forward? But I love to start with the B, and that is one of the ways we slow down, is just, who do I need to show up as in order to achieve this thing? So that can be extremely grounding and extremely lightening. It's very uncomfortable, but usually I can get people, the best way for me to get them there is really by digging. And I'm guessing you've experienced this a lot too, where people are like, I have this problem, right? They're like, I just used this example yesterday. It was like, I have an issue with I'm not bringing in enough new clients, let's say, right? Like I have a sales issue. I'm not bringing in enough new clients. And then if you dig more and more and more and more and more, it's like, actually, your issue is not marketing or whatever that you think it is. Your issue is that you haven't trained your sales staff, let's say that, right? Like you haven't taken the time to train them or bring them up to speed or like educate them enough on the product that they're selling. So your issue isn't that you need to create more sales or hire more salespeople or market more. Your issue is you need to slow down and train the people you have. And so the best way to get people to slow down is actually to help them to identify what the real problem is or what the real thing it is that they're targeting. And when they see that, they're like, oh, and it forces them to slow down because they see it. So that's the best way that I accomplish it.
Yes, I can relate to that so much. I have a client that had that exact same problem, and their sales volume was through the roof. The issue wasn't that they didn't have high sales volume. The issue is that their sales team didn't know what they were selling and they didn't know the product. So once you solve that, conversions increase and the problem solved without any new real expenditures or outlay other than training. But the slowing down to sit, to get to the root and the core of the problem, then once you get there, actioning it from a place of alignment ends up solving it so much faster.
Yes.
I'm curious if you do any of this work. You've mentioned grounding several times, so I'm assuming you do. But one of the highest skill sets I think a leader can have is nervous system regulation. The ability to regulate their nervous system, to be sober-minded, to make decisions out of alignment fairly quickly. Like when we can consolidate that and do it with, okay, my heart is beating out of my chest. I'm feeling that. I'm recognizing it in my body. I'm realizing I'm not being chased out by a bear right now. And getting back to that, I call it the sacred seat, but getting back to the sacred seat versus the scared seat so you can be integrated. Do you do that work as well?
So I do, but I do it in small doses. And I was just talking about it yesterday because one of my clients, we were joking about something and I was like, yeah, when you get to that phase in your life, make sure that you're seeing a therapist. And we were just being silly. And she was like, no, but I actually stopped seeing my therapist because I don't have anxiety now that I'm working with you. And I was like, well, I'm not a trained therapist. I'm not trained in, is it like NLP or, and I'm not trained in, I know there's a lot of like trauma informed training that you can go through and I'm not.
MR, all that stuff.
Yes. However, one of the coaching methodologies I'm trained in is called process coaching. And that is very therapeutic because it essentially helps them process their emotions. And so that type of coaching is like getting them to go into their bodies. A lot of times what works the best for me when I'm working with people who are like, I don't want to do a breathing exercise, right? So I kind of go based on my audience, right? But most of my clients are people who are like, I am not interested in a breathing exercise. Usually I will do visualization exercises with them where I'll have them close their eyes and I'll have them go into their body and then we'll go through visualization. That is extremely grounding and it can be very perspective shifting because it forces a slowdown. And I have found it for clients that are not into like any sort of like meditation or breathing, that the visualization helps a lot because it somehow feels more, I don't know. It feels like they're more open-minded to it. So that's like the number one tool that I use when I need to help my clients like return, or if they're going through some sort of intense emotion, it's like, let's find where that lives in your body and let's move through it so you can process it and release it.
I love that. That brought up for me, like when you said release, like I'm curious, in your experience, what do you think entrepreneurs collectively need to let go of to actually experience success?
The first thing that came to mind, and maybe this is just as somebody I was not on social media at all prior to becoming an entrepreneur. So maybe this is somebody who's just like fully saturated in the social media space now and being around it. The number one thing is releasing what you think it's supposed to look like, what other people, it's really like releasing. You cannot buy your way into results. Like, yeah, I've just noticed entrepreneurs like, oh, I'm just going to buy this mentorship. Or they'll say like, I'm going to pay for Rosie to coach me. But guess what? You still have to do the work, right? So it's like letting go. Like you can't buy your way into it. You have to do the hard work on yourself, the hard internal work. And that you have to let go of what you think it's supposed to look like, what somebody else told you it should look like, what somebody else told you your goal should be. And so that really is the number one thing. And the second one is once you're willing to let go, then you have to be willing to go and do the hard work and find out like, what's your thing? What are the things that are going to be most aligned for you, the most meaningful for you? Because that's where you're going to see the best results.
Can you explain? I've gone through this, so I feel like and you probably have too. So can you explain what that process feels like?
What the process of letting go feels like?
Yes. So you're letting go of what you think it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And you're moving into doing the work. And people say this all the time. You got to be willing to do the work. I don't want to work with you unless you do the work. And I think people don't know what that actually means. What do you, because entrepreneurs come to me all the time and they'll say, I will do whatever it takes. And my immediate response is, whatever it takes is going to look very different than what you think whatever it takes looks like.
Yes. Whatever it takes is not working 100 hours a week. Like that is not what we need from you.
Yes.
Yes.
So what does it feel like? I'm curious your experience and your insight.
Yeah. It feels extremely uncomfortable and can honestly be excruciating and it makes sense because a lot of times like doing the work is when you are working 100 hours a week, you are partially doing that to avoid this excruciating, uncomfortable feeling. So the work is just facing these things inside of yourself that you don't want to face. And so letting go there is absolutely like a grieving process. And I will say like the number one thing is just, it's facing the things about yourself, about your life, about your business, about your world that exist, but you might not even have the words, especially depending on the person and how much work they've done, right? Like you might not even have the words to articulate what it is. You might not none of us grew up with language on how to express our emotions and how we feel with things. So it's like there is like this huge therapeutic aspect of like, you're doing these things because you're angry or you're resentful. And this is how it's showing up in your business, and facing that anger or resentment that you have and like understanding where that comes from so that you can release it, that it's just extremely painful because when people want to do the work, they're like, oh, I'll buy this program. I'll hire this coach. I'll do this. And then when we're coaching together, they're like, okay, Rosie, what are the answers? You're a coach. I'm like, no, that's not my job. My job is to help you find the answers. And I will ask you questions and we'll dig, but I don't have your answers. You are the only one that has I can tell you, I can consult with you and I can tell you different things, but I can't tell you what your answers are. And that it's so hard to describe like that. I'm trying to articulate it in words, and it's really difficult to describe what that looks like, but it's really not abdicating your power and being willing to look internally for your answers and recognizing that like the work that you have to do is not in the amount of hours you work. It's like within what you're willing to face and how vulnerable you're willing to be to open up to even go there to begin with. And that we could probably talk about for 3 more hours. It's really hard, especially, no offense to my men, but it's the hardest for men to learn how to go there because none of us were taught that, but for men, they were directly taught that the only acceptable emotion is anger. And so if you repress anger, or if you express a lot of anger, if that's your only emotion that you can call on, you've got a lot of other stuff going on. And men are just historically haven't been able to express vulnerability. So it takes a lot more work for them to learn how to go there, in my experience, than women.
Before we hit record, I was sharing that today, 5 years ago, is when we buried my mother. And we brought up the book Atlas of the Heart, which Brene Brown wrote. And when you were just sharing this, you're saying, I don't have the answers. It's inside of whomever I'm working with, which is true because they are constructing their world, their life, their perception, their lens on things in a way that's going to be congruent with their heart. that's going to make them feel meaning and belonging and connection and joy and peace, and then have that overflow into their external world in material ways that resemble that. And when you're saying the mapping it's the atlas. They're the only one that has the map to reconnect with who they truly are, going back to identity. Who am I, and how do I express that in the world? And in my experience, that process is incredibly messy. It is, you're feeling your way through the dark. Just when you think you have clarity, it's like you uncover another locked corner in your heart. I call it like clearing the cobwebs of your heart. And when you clear the cobwebs, you emerge and you're like, oh, wow, it's beating. And oh, this is what makes me feel energized. This is what makes me feel alive. This is what makes me feel connected. And I can express it in my business in this way. I can express it with my significant other in this way. I can express it in my community or my family this way. I can express it in these ways philanthropically. And the core of who I am is this. And now, not everyone else can see it, but I can see it and I'm connected to it. And it's incredibly uncomfortable because as entrepreneurs, at least in my life, it was super uncomfortable because we've been taught, the whole construct of entrepreneurship is you identify a problem, you think, oh, I'm equipped to solve it, I'm going to be the one to solve it, and then you go solve it, and then you're rewarded with money, recognition, accolades, all these things for doing it. And so we create these transactional scenarios where, oh, problem, I'll solve it, I'll get recognized, dopamine hit, I feel good. And so we create these constructs. And then when we go, oh, that's not working, it's not producing what I want, we have to go solve it. And so the work is going, everything I've done up until this point is not working. And if I keep doing it, I'm insane. And therefore I have to do something different, but nobody has the roadmap.
Yeah. And it's funny, as you were saying that, it reminded me of like that work of facing that it's not working, even if it's producing the results or outcomes you're looking for, but it's not working for you. You're miserable. You're exhausted all the time. Your relationships are failing, right? Like, it not working doesn't just mean income or like revenue, right? Not working can mean a lot of things. And because we are such like a productivity obsessed society, it's like, yes, that like slowing down and doing the work, it's intangible. So it's really hard for people. It's extremely difficult emotionally, especially if you haven't done that kind of work before and you don't have the language for the emotions that are going on. And then you top that with, it doesn't feel productive. You don't walk away from a session of processing your emotions feeling like I accomplished something today, right? But I will say, I was just using this example the other day. I coached with a client. We had taken a couple months break, and she came back and she told me she had lost a parent really tragically, and she had these two business ventures that were failing in her mind. Like, so there was just like a lot of loss that she had in different areas of personal and professional of her life. And for a couple sessions, we were trying to do it like the business way, right? And then I was like, I'm sorry, can we try a different type of coaching today? And that's when we did this process coaching. And after that, it's like, it allowed her to add, when you said the cobwebs of your heart, like most of the time when I work with people that need to process things, I'll have them go in, like we'll close and we'll visualize going into the part of their body that feels like it's like tight or just like calling to them in a certain way. Most of the time they're going to their heart and they're and exploring something in there, opening a door to something that they hadn't before in the visual. And so yeah, we left that session and she just felt like really connected and had an experience where she was able to release some things. And then our next two sessions are that she like accelerated so fast. Like, we had been going so slow because we were trying to strategize and we were trying to do all the things. And it wasn't until we took one session to really process it that she could go 1,000 miles an hour again, but do it in a way that she felt connected with who she was. So she was seeing results and going faster, but doing it in a way that felt energizing and not draining to her. And so, but it's like, how do you explain? It's really hard to get people to buy into that because it still feels so intangible. And then once they face it, they're like, this is what I have to do. No, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want, so finding that it's like, you really have to be willing to step into that discomfort in order to get at those types of results.
When you were describing that, it was reminding me of our minds. Like 95% of it is conscious, 5% is subconscious. And even your comment about men struggling with this work a little bit more. And it's because we identify so strongly with the part of our mind that is conscious. And so we think logic and strategy and dotting our I's, crossing our T's, road mapping it is the answer. But a lot of times the answers are subconscious. Yeah. And when you do the work of closing their eyes and visualizing and dropping in to their deeper knowing, then they get that alignment, and then they can solve it and have exponential growth so much faster in 2 weeks that would have taken years. Some people spend 20 years to get to a place where if they would just do this work, they could integrate it so much quicker. But it is messy and it is uncomfortable, and therefore a lot of the resistance and all of our roadblocks start coming up. And then those are the things that we have to let go of and drop to the side to tap into the part of us that knows the answers that our mind is blocking us from.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to think that the work is not worth it. And so what have you found is on the other side of doing the work?
Yeah, as you said that, I was like, how could they possibly think the work isn't worth it? It's so, yes. But now that I'm like processing what you said, it's like, yeah, when you're in it, you're like, screw this sometimes, it's like, this is so hard. And as you're doing this work, it's not like, oh, okay, I feel great now. Like, it is a process. Depending on what it is and how you're going about it, it can take time. I will say that sometimes in my life, I have chased this concept of being on the other side. And I was like, I just need to get past this or to get through this. And so being mindful of like, being on the other side doesn't mean I just have to tough it out, though it is tough. It's like more when thinking about being on the other side as like, it's not getting through, you're moving through. And getting to the other side means that, I don't know, as I was describing it, I'm thinking of like, you're moving through something and you're like taking the nuggets of things that will serve you so that you get to this other side and you're reshaped, and you're just leaving behind the things that aren't. And so getting to the other side, it's the reason that I'm like struggling with this phrase, I think, is because it's like the work doesn't stop once you're on the other side. Then it's just like, I loved how you said it made me think of like a video game. When you get to like the next level, you're like, your level 10 is now your level 1.
Yeah.
It's like, there's more things over there waiting for you. However, you will approach them differently. You will approach them more holistically. You will feel more connected and more authentic in just like, you will feel empowered in who you are. So that getting to the other side is not that the work is over, but the work does get easier. It does get easier to do because now you've made it through. You know what tools to call on, you know what serves you, you know what doesn't. You're maybe clear on your values. You're like, I'm not even going to waste my time with that this time around. So it's like getting on the other side, it allows you to go faster because you feel like yourself, you feel connected, aligned, but you also are clear on what works and what doesn't work, what matters, what doesn't matter. The things that you lie to yourself about, you can't lie to yourself about anymore. So it makes you faster at making decisions. So it's just like the things that feel extremely excruciating become not excruciating. That is like probably the easiest way that I could do it. It's still hard, but it's not excruciating anymore. I
love that you double tapped on getting to the other side. Because what that concept I call the performance perfection trap, like it puts you in survivor mode because okay, I just got to endure this little bit, and then once I get there, then I can take a breath. And people live in these cycles of endurance, which is survivor mode, and they aren't actually deeply connected and feeling lighter on their journey. Yeah. And I think it is very much like a video game. You get to one level, and then you get to a new level and a new level and a new level, and you're being called up or you're being called forward. And that is the journey. But what you said is so true. And I've experienced this in my life. You're carrying less. So the journey is still the journey, is just lighter. Mm-hmm. And the things that I think also when you said you can't lie to yourself in the same ways that you've lied to yourself, that hits hard. And it's true. And it's not that you're a liar. It's not even that you knew that you were lying, You have this program that has been running in your subconscious for so long that you've identified it with it as you. It's not you though. And so clearing the cobwebs is letting that all go, letting everything go that you thought was you, so you can really have open arms for the you that is you.
Yeah. Yeah. 100. Everything that you said. Some of these things we talk about give me goosebumps because it's just so true. Yeah, we don't realize we're lying to myself, though sometimes I think deep down we know we are, but it's like it's more because we're not ready or willing to face the truth. And so we have to lie to ourselves. It's like a survival mechanism. We have to lie to ourselves. And yes, but once you have that freedom, it's like it made me think of there are certain things, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Your eyes are just opened. And that's also what being on the other side, it looks like. It's like, I just see things now in a different light, and it makes it easier for me to let go of things, to face my truth, to like, it's, yeah. So once there's getting on the other side really is like, just your eyes are open now in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved what you said about your carrying less, because that is absolutely true. And you don't really realize how much you're carrying until you stop carrying it. And you're like, oh, like I physically feel lighter too,
Yeah.
right? It's not just less mental clutter, it's less physically. You're like, things just feel light and easy. And I didn't realize it could be this way because it was heavy for a lot of times for your whole life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's where I think the grief comes in. So coming full circle, I think the initiating phase for me at least is you hit this ceiling, this enough is enough, the way I'm operating, I can't operate anymore. And then there's grief. It's like, I've got to let go of so much. I've got to learn to integrate. I need to learn to heal. I need to approach my business, my relationships, my schedule, my time, my energy, my mental capacity in such a different way. And I don't have a model for it.
Yeah.
Because I'm the creator of it. And therefore then learning to trust yourself, going back to your values. Trust is my highest value as well. And when you have to build self-trust, and then in business you build team trust, and then an extension of that is your tribe trust. And the journey is messy because what we've really done is self-betrayed a lot, but we don't know that we've self-betrayed so much, but we did, and we fragmented our soul. And again, lied to ourselves, but we didn't know we were lying to ourselves. And so it's this whole process of rebuilding self-trust that is messy, it's clunky, it's unpredictable, it requires grief. Sometimes you feel lonely. This is why coaching has been so impactful in my life, and even nervous system coaching, health coaching, executive coaching, masterminds, all of that are so helpful, not because it solves it for you, because you're held through the messy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I feel like as you're talking, I'm processing, and just it's reminding me of, I can't remember if I told you about Anne-Marie Norton. She's done so much. Jerry Norton, he's a real estate investor, and he has a huge program. They have a family of 10, but his wife Anne-Marie is absolutely amazing, and she just talks so much about, like, she is very well trained on coaching and on the nervous system and regulation and all of that. So as you were talking, it was just reminding me of so much of what she said. And it's really that I love, just even I've learned so much talking to you just in this conversation, because that is something that I'm not trained in, B, I'm not well versed in. I know sort of my tools, and that is something that I think is so important and not integrated enough into the coaching space. So when there are coaches that have that type of training, especially somebody like you, that like you have this very strong, I was talking with somebody the other day, like as a society, we value technical skills. Like you have this strong technical skills around helping people organize. And what they don't realize is the thing that gets them to the next level is like mastering the technical skill is the baseline. The thing that gets you to the next level is mastering what I call the behavioral skills, because I don't like to call them soft skills. It's like that is what allows you to go from good to great. And so if you are just coaching somebody purely on their business and ignoring all of the human elements of it, they will never be great. They will, if they will be the exception and definitely not the rule.
Yes. And they might lose their soul in the entire process of achieving.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. And there are those people that make those choices and that's them. But I don't, in my coaching experience, the people, I have yet to coach somebody that actually wants that. The people that want to sell their souls, they do, and that's their choice. And that's that. But I have yet to coach somebody who doesn't want to do that level of work. We all go in different phases of our life where if we're actually ready for the work. And I've certainly had phases in my life where I thought I was ready and I dipped my toes in and I was like, okay, I thought I was ready, but I'm not, you know?
I don't want to open the can of worms yet. Let's pull it back on.
Exactly. Yes. And then it's like, it keeps coming back and back. And then eventually like, all right, I got to just, eat the frog. Yeah.
Yeah. I could talk with you more and more. Maybe we'll do a second round at some point. And I love that you're passionate about female entrepreneurs and building a community. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So they can find me on social media. My handle is the Rosie Noel at the Rosie Noel. And my website is rosienoel.com. So there's lots of information on there as well. But that's the best place to find me.
I love it. And I appreciate how you, even in this episode, we're so embodied and very much here. And I can tell that not only are you coaching people on doing the work, but you are also doing the work. And I think that is a high value of mine, is leading by example. And so I appreciate and I recognize and I see that in you. So thank you for being on. Yeah, and we'll put all of your info in the show notes so people can connect with you. And I will be cheering for you on social media.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure getting to know you. And like I said, I've learned so much just from this conversation alone. So thank you for sharing that with me as well. This has been really special.
Thank you. And to you who are listening, I think Rosie and I both would hope that you would find who you are and get to that seat of alignment and then take action from there. And if you need help doing the work, whether it's in your mind or in your tactical actions, we are here to support. So make sure you stay rooted while you execute. Cheers, y'all.